Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are attempting something pretty ambitious.
I'd say so.
We're trying to build a bridge, really, between the highly abstract world of European political philosophy
Right.
and the very real, very kinetic, and let's be honest, sweaty world of the Latin social dance floor.
It's a connection that, on the surface, seems almost impossible, but that's what we're here to unpack.
Exactly. Over the next half hour or so, we're going to explore this really radical argument that the way we move our bodies, specifically in a space like salsa, might actually hold a blueprint.
A blueprint for building a progressive political movement, a new, what the sources call a hegemony.
That's a perfect way to frame it. Our mission today is to really get into these sources that use the philosophy of thinkers like Ernesto Laclau and Jacques Derrida to create a practical, strategic template for social justice.
And this isn't just, theory for the sake of theory. We're trying to translate these huge political concepts, antagonism, leadership, coalition building, into the embodied dynamics of a dance.
Into lead and follow, collaboration, movement.
Exactly. We want to show you how a vibrant, competitive salsa troupe can, in a very real way, model a profoundly resilient form of radical democracy.
Okay, so let's set the stage for this, because the sources immediately ask us to understand a pretty significant philosophical divide.
Right.
We're operating in what's called the continental philosophy tradition, and, getting that context is just critical to the whole argument.
Absolutely. Think of it like the philosophical world has two main operating systems.
Okay.
On one side, you've got the continental tradition. This is what was historically dominant in places like France and Germany. And it's a tradition that's modeled on things like history, literature, the arts.
So it's focused on meaningfulness, depth.
Exactly. Meaningfulness, depth, the subjective human experience. It's all about narrative and context.
And the other side, its rival, is the Anglo-American or analytic school.
Right. Prevalent in the U.S. and Britain. And that school is modeled more on the natural sciences, on formal logic.
So it's all about precision, clarity, rigor.
Verifiable claims. If the continental side is this sprawling, complex novel, the analytic side is more like a tight, elegant mathematical equation.
And this isn't just some, abstract academic debate. The sources really stress that for figures like Laclau in Argentina or Derrida in Algeria, both absolutely central to this, the choice of tradition is fundamentally political.
It is. They argue that the mainstream Anglo-American tradition, by always prioritizing this universal, context-free logic, it often sidesteps its own lingering complicities with colonial history, with power structures.
It's like if you demand only objective, abstract logic, you end up erasing the very real local histories. You erase the embodied experiences and the cultural stories of marginalized people.
Precisely. So choosing the continental path, the one that values history, embodiment, and art, that becomes a strategic act in itself. It's an act of decolonization in the world of thought.
So if we try to take Laclau's political theory, which is all about fluidity and shifting identities, and then we try to cram it into a neat analytic box,
then you miss the entire point. The political purpose is lost.
We have to approach his ideas about political movement in a way that respects their inherent dance-like quality.
We're looking for the choreography of power, not just a logical syllogism.
Which sets the stage perfectly for Laclau's main project, Hegemony.
Mm-hmm.
His core idea is that a progressive coalition has to strategically unite all these different flags or demands, Black Lives Matter, environmental justice, workers' rights.
All these particular struggles.
And unite them under one strategically chosen banner, what he calls an empty signifier.
And that banner is then used to challenge the dominant power structure, which for him is global capitalism.
And crucially, this coalition, this hegemony, it's not a static thing. It's not a treaty you sign and you're done.
Not at all. It's constantly in motion. It requires this continuous creative effort of alignment and realignment. It's a lot like a choreographer who's ethically responsible to a whole troupe of diverse, embodied dancers.
Each with their own skills, their own stories, their own physical limits.
And if that movement stops, the coalition just freezes up, the hegemony collapses.
So if Laclau's theory is itself a kind of political choreography, we need a language to actually describe that movement.
And that leads us straight to the author's philosophical framework, which they call figuration.
So now we're jumping right into section 1, figuration, dancing with, and the decolonizing body. This is really the methodological foundation. It's the bridge from philosophy to the dance floor.
Right, and figuration as a project is designed to correct this long-standing bias in philosophy. Historically, philosophers love the idea of dance,
Dance of politics, the dance of the cosmos?
Exactly. They love the metaphor, but they very rarely grant any real philosophical weight to the actual physical, sweaty practice of dancing.
And the sources are really insistent on this point. The literal, physical act of dance, it transgresses that whole literal versus figurative divide.
It's not just like philosophy. It is a form of embodied kinetic philosophy.
And it's a political choice, too, in terms of what kind of dance it focuses on.
Very much so. Figuration consciously valorizes dances that are favored by the marginalized, so salsa, cumbia, folk vernacular dances over the highbrow, traditionally privileged forms like ballet or modern dance.
So by just redefining what counts as philosophically important movement, it's already performing this little act of decolonization within academia.
Yes.
Okay, so let's break down the essential movements of this philosophy. Figuration is built around 4 central concepts, or moves. And the first one is positure.
Positure. It's defined as the dynamic imitation of stasis.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
The insight, which draws on thinkers from Plato to Nietzsche, is that no living system, whether it's an animal or a political system, is ever truly static. It's never really at rest.
So even when a body looks completely still?
It's covertly moving, it's engaged in these continuous micro-adjustments just to maintain the appearance of rest.
It's like holding a plank at the gym.
Yeah.
You look still, but every muscle is fighting gravity. If you stop that hidden movement, you collapse.
Exactly. And you can apply that politically. Think about a political regime that projects this image of eternal stability, like a powerful two-party system. That stasis is positure. It's an imitation.
Because underneath that calm surface.
Yet there's always constant, sometimes violent movement, ideological fractures, lobbying, grassroots organizing, technological shifts. That appearance of rest is only maintained by spending enormous amounts of continuous hidden energy.
So true political stability isn't the absence of movement, it's the mastery of movement.
It's active instability management. That's positure.
That's a huge reframing. Okay, the second move is gesture.
Gesture is defined as the carrying across funding language.
That's a bit of a mouthful.
It is, but it's intentional. It highlights the etymology of gesture. It means to carry across. And the argument drawing from people like George Herbert Mead and Julia Kristeva is pretty profound.
Which is?
That all gestures, including the gestures of language, is invested in and founded on the movements of our bodies.
So wait, you're saying our physical movements aren't just illustrating language. They're actually involved in creating it, in funding it.
That's it, exactly. Our human capacity for complex physical movement is what makes abstract language possible in the first place. Before we could articulate the concept of up or down or carry, we experience those actions with our bodies.
So the body is like the investment bank for communication.
A perfect analogy. When a political leader makes a powerful gesture, a clenched fist, a hand on a shoulder, that's not just rhetorical flair, it is the fundamental embodied kinetic origin of the political message. It carries the meaning across.
The third move is grace, defined as a pleasing figure-ground reversal.
Right. And grace is this achieved integration of the self and its environment. In graceful movement, the environment seems to move seamlessly through the organism.
The dancer doesn't look like they're fighting the floor or gravity.
No, it's the opposite. The environment itself seems to accommodate or even assist the dancer's will. The roles reverse. The room is no longer an antagonist.
And how does that translate politically?
A graceful political movement is one that integrates so smoothly with the socio-historical conditions that it ends up looking inevitable.
Oh, interesting.
Think of a major policy shift, like universal health care. If the movement is graceful, the economic conditions, the legislative process, public opinion, they all seem to spontaneously accommodate this new idea rather than fighting it.
It feels like it was always meant to be.
Yes. Grace is the aesthetic achievement of making profound political change look effortless and natural.
And finally, we have resilience, a flourishing recirculation.
This one draws on thinkers who were all about enduring struggle, like Fanon and Butler, and it really emphasizes the etymology of the word resiliere, to leap back or to jump again.
So it's more than just survival.
Much more. It's about persisting through time's deformations, bringing back into shape, and actually flourishing after you've been challenged. It's recirculation. The energy is channeled back into the system, not just lost.
That feels incredibly important for any progressive movement, which is always facing setbacks.
Of course. You look at historical struggles like the U.S. Civil Rights Movement. They were defined by repeated setbacks, arrests, violence. Resilience means they didn't just survive those blows, they used the energy of the resistance to fuel the next action, the next leap.
So when community leaps back politically, they're not just going back to how things were.
No, they're using the experience of that deformation to flourish in a new, stronger configuration. This move is really the core kinetic ingredient for building a lasting hegemony.
So with these 4 moves in place, the framework then uses them to categorize the 7 families of dance.
Yeah, and it uses Wittgenstein's idea of family resemblances to do it.
Which is key because it avoids trying to find one single perfect definition for dance.
Exactly. Just like games, some are competitive, some are solitary, some use a ball, some don't dance phenomena just share these overlapping, crisscrossing similarities. So the 7 families here let figuration cover everything from ballet to salsa to even the discursive movements of political debate.
And we have to circle back to that linguistic connection the author makes. Wittgenstein's German word for language games is Sprachspiel,
where the root, spiel, originally meant dance.
So language games are literally language dances.
Which signals that the very process of making meaning is a physical, embodied activity. It justifies treating literal dance like salsa and figurative discourse like Laclau's philosophy as being on equal footing. They're both just different kinds of discursive dances.
And all of this philosophical work, it lays the groundwork for the ethical method that defines the rest of the project, the dancing with interpretive method.
This is a methodology aimed at achieving what the source calls poetic social justice. It requires a mutual empowerment between 2 theorists or 2 political ideas. Let's call them X and Y.
And the mechanism for this is a creative torsion.
Yes, a torsion. You gently twist theorist Y's thought, usually towards unconscious, embodied political factors, and at the same time, you sympathetically twist X's thought toward Y.
They meet in the middle.
They meet in the middle, ideally, like 2 partners achieving synchronization on the dance floor. The word torsion is deliberate. It's a gentle, necessary stress, not a violent distortion.
And to make sure this isn't just, arbitrary academic games, there are 4 specific strategic positings. These are the ethical guidelines.
Right. And the first is that canonical theorists, Plato, Derrida, Laclau, are assumed to prioritize social justice enough that their ideas are capable of being torsioned.
So their ideas aren't static, they can self-correct.
Yes. The second follows from that. Creative interpreters, like us or you, are required to use the interpretation to actively promote social justice beyond the original context. The interpretation has to do something in the world.
Okay, the third one is the most imaginative. It says that the canonical theorists would affirm these new interpretations if they occupied our embodied positions today.
This is that Plato-Dubois thought experiment. If Plato were reincarnated today as a 20th century Black intellectual like Dubois, would he still cling to his abstract forms of justice that ignore racism?
The assumption is no.
The assumption is he would torsion his philosophy to engage with that reality. It's a way of holding the philosophical canon accountable.
But the fourth positing adds the balance.
Exactly. Interpreters have to remain open to the canonical theorists' untorsioned truths. It's not a license to just reject everything. It requires trust, sympathy, and humility.
It really is a high-stakes negotiation.
It is, like 2 strangers negotiating their first salsa dance. There's a potential height difference, experience difference, cultural difference. The only safe way to do it is with mutual good faith. These 4 positings are that commitment to good faith.
Which brings us to the dance itself. Salsa as a decolonizing discourse. Why salsa specifically?
Salsa is chosen precisely because its identity is rooted in displacement and revolution. It's a syncretism of so many Caribbean forms, mambo, son, danzon, which are themselves a synthesis of Spanish, African, and indigenous traditions.
It's a product of colonial and post-colonial pressure.
Completely. And the source identifies 3 key eras: the 1950s mambo craze, the 1970s kitchen-style salsa of popular revolt in the barrios, and then the global commercial boom from the 90s onward.
And there's a connection here to the analysis of Argentine tango.
A strong one. Tango became globally popular because it capitalized on the colonial market for the passion of the exoticized, colonized other. Salsa shares that fate. It's often sold globally for its Afro-Latin heat.
But the crucial point is that this position of passion also holds agency.
Yes. It's a space where the marginalized body is seen, felt, and can exert real cultural force. So the goal of this whole project is to partner the energetic movements of the Afro-Latin body mind to Laclau's abstract philosophy.
To transform hegemony from a concept into a discursive dancing with.
And that's how we move toward a decolonizing political theory.
So let's transition now to section 2, Laclau's hegemony, a choreography of politics. And to get Laclau, we really have to start with his own life.
You absolutely do. To grasp his thought, you have to see him first as an intense political activist. He was not an armchair theorist.
The sources really emphasize this. Everything for him begins and ends with political struggle. He was a student leader, and he was an editor for Lucha Obrero Workers' Struggle in Argentina.
A publication that was so controversial, its offices were once bombed. This background makes his theory, as the source says, decisively strategic. His concepts are tools for real-world struggle.
So his core idea, hegemony as coalitional motion, let's go back to that.
As we said, Laclau argues that a progressive coalition has to unite all these different demands under one central figurative flag, the empty signifier.
And the coalition is always in motion, with the leader, the choreographer, ethically responsible to the whole troupe.
Which brings us to his key terms, this coherent duet of dislocation and the empty signifier. Dislocation is the mechanism of movement. It's when a symbol of political identity detaches from its own little subgroup.
It gets dislocated.
And it shifts to become the standard bearer for the entire coalition.
Can you give us a concrete example of that?
Sure. Take the concept of sustainability. Originally, that was maybe narrowly located in environmental science, right? Demanding specific green energy policies. But through dislocation, it moves. It becomes the empty signifier that unites all sorts of groups. Workers demanding sustainable jobs, developing nations demanding sustainable economies, civil rights groups demanding sustainable communities free from pollution.
So the word sustainability dislocates from its technical origins and shifts to represent this universal popular demand for a better future.
And it becomes the empty vessel for the whole coalition. That relationship, the movement of symbols filling the universal vessel, is the coherent duet that defines political success for Laclau.
And the sources ground this idea by looking at how post-Marxist theory has been applied to dance before.
It does. Laclau's late partner, Chantal Mouffe, she coined the term choreopolitical performances. These are political actions that aim to open a space for what she calls an agonistic encounter.
Agonism, that's a key term. It means a fierce, disciplined, but respectful confrontation.
Exactly, a confrontation between progressives and reactionaries. The performance itself is the mechanism for that clash.
And we also see this focus on dance as an articulatory power, in the Argentinian example of Mariano Gallego.
Right. Gallego argues that the political left should strategically replace tango, which he sees as this bourgeois, fetishized national dance with cumbia.
Cumbia as the new hegemonic dance of the poor and disempowered in Argentina. So the choice of the dance form is the political choice.
It is, which highlights this very real cumbia tango class differential. And the sources point out this class structure isn't just in Argentina, it's replicated internationally.
Specifically citing the template troupe in Birmingham, Alabama.
Yes. In Birmingham, cumbia is clearly linked to lower socioeconomic status, predominantly non-white, often undocumented Latinx groups. It's the marginalized social dance. Meanwhile, tango is the prestigious group, founded by wealthy physicians, mostly white or wealthier Latinx people.
It's a clear global pattern.
It is. So it makes the political choice of dance strategic. If progressives adopt a dance like salsa or cumbia as their aesthetic, they are strategically aligning themselves with the identity of the disempowered.
And signaling an openness to an international alliance built on this popular, embodied kind of hegemony.
The dance itself becomes the political strategy. It's not just about what people say, but how they move and the material conditions that produce that movement.
So we've established the politics and the method. Now we dive into section 3, the deconstruction dance floor, Laclau and Derrida. This is where the philosophical footwork gets really crucial.
It really is. The sources focus on Laclau's interpretation of Derrida, arguing that deconstruction isn't just an academic game, it's deeply relevant to two key dimensions of the political.
Which are?
First, the political as the instituting moment of society, that chaotic, creative act where a community decides its own structure. And second, the incompletion of all acts of political institution.
The recognition that every structure is temporary, contingent.
Right. Deconstruction helps us understand both the founding leap and the guaranteed future failure of any system.
And he applies this deconstructive lens to the concept of representation. How does he flip that?
Well, conventionally, representation flows one way, right? The representative is responsible to the fully formed identities of the people they represent. Laclau deconstructs this. He claims representation flows both ways. Yes, the representative is accountable, but the represented's identities are often, well, incomplete. And they have to be supplemented by the representative.
Okay, that sounds really risky. If the representative is supplementing the identity of the people, doesn't that open the door to demagoguery? A leader just telling people who they are?
That is the core danger, and he's very aware of it. But the risk emerges from specific social conditions. In situations of high social dislocation, say, the third world or post-industrial gig economies, social identities get shattered. People lack a shared language to articulate a coherent political will.
So the role of the popular leader is to provide the language, the narrative, that allows them to reconstitute a political identity.
And here's the dance resonance. A choreographer is essentially that leader. The language they provide is technique, a rich system of positions, gestures, fashion, movement.
And that technique gives the diverse bodies in the troupe a shared identity and purpose. It reconstitutes them.
Exactly. A self-consciously hegemonic society is like a democratic dance troupe. The choreographers, the leaders, are tasked with providing the kinetic language to unify shattered identities, but they have to do it ethically.
Which brings us to the madness of decision and the leap of dance. Laclau connects the political decision to Kierkegaard's idea of the madness of that instant of decision.
Right. And Kierkegaard's famous leap of faith is often seen as this radical religious jump. But the sources remind us that Kierkegaard himself explicitly based the concept on the sudden, decisive jumps of theatrical dance.
The jump is the break from determinism.
Yes, and the linguistic link reinforces it. The German word spielen and the Latin saltare both mean to leap and to dance. In multiple languages, the radical act of leaping is the same as the creative act of dancing.
And this is where Laclau brings in that Arab proverb, nobody can jump outside his own shadow.
And if you substitute dance for jump, it means the choreographer, the leader, must always come from and return to their troupe, to their community. You can't just transcend the system. The leap is mad, but it has to be grounded.
Which culminates in the big realization that hegemony is the dance.
Yes, Laclau links the logic of the engine of hegemony with deconstruction. Because no system is complete, its political frontiers are always porous, undecidable.
And that means identities inside it are constitutively dislocated, their contingency is revealed.
Right. To deconstruct a political structure is to show the distance between all the infinite ways power could have been arranged and the one way that it did get arranged.
And that distance, that gap, is the space of freedom and risk.
So the equation solidifies. Political decision equals madness equals a jump equals a Kierkegaardian leap equals a leap of dance. The moment of political institution, the founding of a new hegemony, is the mad creative act of the choreographer-dancer troupe. Hegemony is a dance.
This leads to Laclau's idea of the political subject, which we can call the dancer-dance formula.
He states that the emergence of the subject, the decision-maker, requires that it can't be just subsumed under structural determinism.
So if we substitute dancer for subject and dance for decision.
The formula is dancer, the dance. The dancer must be radically self-determined. The material of their art is their own situated body. There's no transcendental ground, only the floor beneath their feet.
And political action, like dance, is profoundly situated, materialist, and contingent.
But this takes us to the deepest, most complex philosophical layer: spectral incarnation or hauntology.
Okay, let's slow down here. This is a very niche concept.
Yeah.
What is this necessary and impossible object Laclau talks about?
Think about an idea like perfect justice or true democracy. These are universal ideals. They're necessary objects that we need to orient our political struggle.
We have to believe in perfect justice to even try to write laws.
Right. But these ideals are impossible to ever fully achieve in the material world. We can never build a political system that perfectly embodies true democracy.
So because the ideal is impossible, our attempts to represent it, our laws, our policies, are always constitutionally inadequate. They always fail.
Correct. The universal object is only ever embodied in a spectral way. It's a ghost, a specter that haunts and guides our actions, but one we can never fully grasp.
And how does this play out in choreography?
The dancer's flesh is what constitutes the specter. The choreographic idea, the ideal technique, the perfect artistic vision, that is the necessary and impossible object. The dancer tries to embody this ideal, but because their body is particular, situated, limited.
They could only embody it spectrally.
Yeah.
Imperfectly.
There's no common measure between the incarnating body and the incarnated object. No dancer can perfectly realize the ideal technique, and no choreographer is the final, perfect choreographer.
And this impossibility is actually what drives constant movement and renewal. It prevents dogma.
Exactly. But there's a cost to trying to embody the impossible ideal.
Which brings us to deformation and revolution.
Laclau says that the particular body, as it tries to embody the universal spirit, is subverted and deformed in its own particularity. This is the high cost of the hegemonic leap.
This resonates so darkly with the dance world. The pursuit of the ideal technique leads to physical deformities, chronic injuries, intense psychological pressure. You see it in films about the vampiric tendencies of choreography.
The dancer sacrifices their physical integrity for the universal idea. And that sacrifice is the political cost of revolution. Revolution is this intense channeling of psychophysical energy to restructure relationships. It demands deformation.
And yet, it's still the path to freedom. The source cites Foucault on Seneca's metaphor. Philosophy spins the subject around, like a pirouette, which was the ritual gesture a master used to free a slave.
It's a profound image. The enslaved person is literally danced into freedom. The dance is the emancipatory act, even though, as Laclau stresses, emancipation is a performance at which we always arrive late.
We're constantly engaged in this painful, impossible task of dancing ourselves free.
We have to keep dancing the leap of freedom.
That brings us from the highest philosophical abstraction to the concrete political imperative. We're at our final section, the Salsa template, Corazon de Alabama and political modeling. Time to ground all this theory.
The template chosen is Corazon de Alabama, or Shirt of Alabama, a competitive performance troupe from Birmingham. And the geography here is vital.
Why Birmingham?
Because it's categorized as a Global South location in the sense used by U.S. Third World feminists, a former colonial slave society with a majority population of colonized people of color. The troupe's very existence there grounds its movements in a decolonizing framework from the start.
So this source reimagines Laclau's abstract hegemony diagram as an aerial view of this troupe. Let's break down that analogy.
The diverse members of the troupe are the S-circles, the political actors, the specific democratic demands. The troupe has dancers from a true rainbow coalition: white, black, Latinx, indigenous, Asian, queer, blue-collar workers, documented and undocumented.
Their unique bodies are the particular demands.
And their shared presence on the floor is the universal demand for recognition.
And the ES, empty signifier, the central flag, is the choreographer-dancer who competes to lead.
Right. They set the tone, articulate the movement language, define the coalitional identity. They embody the spectral ideal just for that moment.
The audience other is the antagonistic rival. The other troupe, the judges, the status quo that dismisses their dance. The foreground is the stage of political performance. The background is the social community they return to.
And their practical political action is trying to reconstruct the status quo of the social dance world. They do it by changing moves, achieving fame, and altering power dynamics for disempowered communities.
They're dancing their way to a new hierarchy of recognition.
Now, there's a crucial caveat here. The sources acknowledge that this focus on competition and hierarchy in the dance world is problematic. It can be cliquish, it can sap energy. But they argue that this hierarchical competitive pattern is exactly what makes it useful for political modeling.
Because in the larger political world, hierarchy is arguably inevitable.
Exactly. Pure egalitarianism might work in a small social space, but it's not realistic for a national political movement. So the model is about managing necessary conflict and necessary hierarchy, but doing it ethically and strategically.
This leads to the detailed modeling of politics on amateur competitive Latin social dance. And there are three key features that should have an analog in radical democracy.
The first is amateur status. None of the dancers do this as a full-time job. They all balance dance with life-sustaining wage work.
And the political analog, A1 from that, is profound. Radical democracy should have no place for full-time professional political actors.
Everyone participates in political action in addition to their everyday work. This prevents that entrenched political class from emerging where their own self-interest takes over.
The second feature, universal partnering.
Dancers have to be willing and able to partner with any other dancer. The choreographer assigns partners based on compatibility, not personal preference, romantic interest, or ideological conflicts.
That is a very tough ask politically.
It is. The political analog B1 is that political actors should be willing to work with others on a project-by-project basis, regardless of ideological clashes or personal dislikes. The goal is the successful performance of the policy, not ideological purity.
And the third feature is community accountability.
Every dancer has to come from and return to the larger social dance community. They have to behave in a way that doesn't obstruct that sense of encompassing belonging. They depend on that ecosystem.
So the political analog, C1, requires political actors to spend most of their time grounded in the larger multicultural community. They're held accountable to it. They have to make sure their work is understood and appreciated.
They have to stay grounded, not fly off into some elite bubble.
And if all these things are followed, the most impactful factor in deciding which signifier achieves hegemony is
the creative aesthetic modality of its movements through the community.
the aesthetic, how the movement looks and feels, is more important than a perfect logical argument.
Which means progressives building a new hegemony should pay far more attention to aesthetic embodied movement when they choose their representatives.
We have to ask, should our leaders be the best debaters or the most graceful, resilient, and aesthetically resonant performers of the community's will?
The source suggests the most effective way to unite might be by embracing our roles as dancers and artists who channel that psychophysical energy into disciplined, aesthetic forms.
This all ends with a final reflective question about the interpretation itself. Should readings of Laclau always have an explicitly decolonizing dimension?
Should they always challenge the Eurocentric gaze by emphasizing things like decolonizing self-transformation and communal becoming with? The whole template suggests a version of Laclau's hegemony that is radically mobile, open to all, able to be both actor and theorist.
A hegemon and the dance.
Exactly. It embraces the necessary conflict of a diverse troupe while maintaining group solidarity. And the antagonism is temporary. It fades as the dancers leave the stage and return to their everyday lives.
What an incredible intellectual and kinetic journey we've taken today, from Laclau and Derrida all the way to a competitive salsa troupe in Alabama.
I think the core philosophical breakthrough here is just insisting that philosophy and dance aren't high and low forms. They're mutually reinforcing gestural discourses.
We've seen how applying those figuration moves, positure, gesture, grace, resilience, to political choreography, reveals that the political decision itself is tied to that disciplined mad jump of the dancer.
It really shifts our political focus. We move from obsessing over the perfect policy document to focusing on the aesthetic and embodied way we structure our coalitions and select our leaders.
It demands that political actors become dancers, self-determined, accountable to the floor, and always recognizing that they're only ever imperfect, spectral embodiments of an impossible ideal.
It's a call to recognize that the pursuit of social justice requires a strategic, aesthetic choice. The choice of which dance to perform, which language to speak, and which bodies we choose to represent that impossible ideal.
It demands we look for the choreographer's hand in every political movement. And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. If emancipation and revolution require a disciplined, creative jump that is analogous to dance, what is the music, the core aesthetic modality, guiding your current struggle for change? And who is the choreographer leading the coalitions in your own community? What would it truly look like if the most effective way to unite for social justice was as dancers and artists committed to a perpetual, resilient performance?
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the kinetic architecture of political philosophy. We hope this has given you plenty of new steps to try on the political dance floor.
We'll see you next time.